Welcome to Anastasia's Whisper. I'm Anastasia, and I'm so happy you're here with me tonight. If you've had a busy day, if your thoughts feel a little heavy, or if you simply long for a moment of quiet, you've come to the right place. Here, we don't chase time. We drift. We wander softly through stories that soothe the mind and gently carry us into rest. Tonight, I'll take you on a gentle journey through palaces, treasure halls, golden courts, and moonlit kingdoms, as we meet some of the most legendary rulers in history. The kings and queens known not only for their power, but for their immense and unforgettable wealth. But don't worry. This isn't the kind of history you need to study. It's not about dates or details. It's about wonder. It's about imagining the candlelight flickering in royal chambers, the hush of silk robes, and the soft echoes of stories that shimmered through time. So snuggle in, let your breath slow, and let's begin our journey into the golden glowing world of the richest rulers in history. Long ago in the heart of West Africa, where the desert met the savanna, there ruled a king whose wealth was so vast, so dazzling, that even centuries later, historians still whisper his name with awe. His name was Mansa Musa, and he is widely considered to be the richest human being in recorded history. Not just among kings, among everyone. He ruled the Mali Empire from around 1312 to 1337, an empire that stretched across modern-day Mali, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Nigeria, and beyond. It was one of the largest and most advanced civilizations of its time, built on trade, culture, learning, and gold. So much gold. In fact, during Musa's reign, Mali may have been responsible for over half the world's supply of gold, and the world noticed. But Mansa Musa's wealth wasn't just measured in glittering metal. It was in his vision, his generosity, his astonishing ability to build something lasting, not just for himself, but for his people. In 1324, Mansa Musa set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca. It was a journey of over 4,000 kilometers, and it would become one of the most extravagant pilgrimages in human history. He traveled with 60,000 people. Yes, 60,000. Among them, soldiers, scholars, merchants, architects, cooks, and holy men. There were hundreds of camels, each carrying up to 135 kilograms, about 300 pounds, of pure gold. It is said that when they reached Cairo, Mansa Musa gave away so much gold to the poor and to merchants that he caused the value of gold to crash in Egypt. And it took 12 years for the economy to recover. No war, no conquest, just one king, and too much generosity. But Musa didn't travel just to impress. He returned from Mecca with architects from Andalusia, scholars from the Middle East, and ideas that would shape the soul of his empire. He built mosques, universities, and libraries in Timbuktu and Gao, transforming his kingdom into a center of learning and culture. Under his rule, the Sankore University of Timbuktu flourished, a place where thousands of manuscripts were written, copied, and studied. Scholars came from across Africa and the Islamic world to learn philosophy, astronomy, medicine, law, and theology. In the 14th century, Timbuktu was what Oxford or Cambridge would later become, but quieter, dustier, and just as brilliant. Mansa Musa believed that wealth was meant to be shared, that knowledge was as valuable as gold, and that an empire's strength lived not only in its armies, but in its ideas. Tonight, we imagine his caravan moving slowly across the desert, silhouettes under the moon, footsteps softened by sand, the rhythmic sounds of drums, the fragrance of dates and incense, and the golden glint of treasure, not locked away, but given freely. When Mansa Musa finally returned home, his empire shone even brighter than before, but the richest thing he left behind wasn't the gold. It was the dream of a civilization where wisdom and kindness walked side by side, where trade routes were lined not with soldiers, but with scholars and storytellers. And so tonight, as the stars settle over the old kingdom of Mali, and the wind carries the scent of ancient earth, we rest beside the legacy of a king who understood that true wealth is what you leave in the hearts of others. Now we drift eastward to a land of silk, poetry, and porcelain, where paper money was already in circulation. Compasses pointed true north, and scrolls flowed with ink from scholars who studied the stars. This was Song Dynasty China, nearly 1,000 years ago, a time of refinement, invention, and prosperity. And ruling over this flourishing realm was Emperor Shenzong, who reigned from the year 1067 to 1085. Shenzong's China was one of the richest civilizations on Earth at the time, not just in treasure, but in culture, in knowledge, in vision. During his rule, the Song economy soared. The empire's population exceeded 100 million people, a number unheard of in Europe at the time. Markets buzzed with spices, tea, jade, and silk. Merchants navigated inland rivers, carrying paper money, the first real paper currency ever used in world history. Yes, while coins were still clinking in the West, the people of the Song dynasty were folding notes into pockets, writing ledgers, and tracking transactions with ink. They built massive cities, some of them home to over 1 million residents, with streetlights, fire brigades, public bathhouses, and bustling night markets. And above it all, calm and thoughtful, was the emperor, Shenzong, whose name means sacred ancestor. Shenzong ruled with the help of one of the most fascinating minds in Chinese history, the reformer and philosopher Wang Anqi, who helped implement sweeping social and economic reforms. Their goal was bold: to reduce poverty, strengthen rural life, and give ordinary people access to education and prosperity. Imagine a government in the 11th century debating tax reform and public schooling. It may sound modern, but it was ancient, quiet, softly revolutionary. And while they discussed such things, poets were writing in moonlight. Inventors were designing the first working mechanical clocks. Artisans glazed porcelain so fine it seemed to hold the reflection of the sky itself. The song court was one of gentle luxury, not the thundering armies of conquest, but the quiet confidence of knowledge. Historians today call this time one of the greatest economic booms in medieval world history. And yet, it was soft, elegant, scholarly. At night, the emperor might walk through candlelit corridors, past ink scrolls and stone dragons, while musicians played the gukchen, a soft, resonant zither that echoed like wind over water. Tonight, as we drift through the gardens of his legacy, we see not gold scattered on desert roads, but paper, poetry, and progress, woven into every corner of daily life. Shenzong's wealth wasn't paraded. It was planted in ideas, in pages, in patience. And so, as the lanterns glow gently in the courtyards of Song China, we breathe in the stillness, the calm hum of a thriving world, and the comfort of knowing that even long ago, wisdom was seen as the highest form of wealth. Now we drift back even further to a time of ancient stone walls, olive groves, and desert stars. A time when wisdom was wealth, and a ruler's words echoed louder than any army. In the heart of ancient Israel, in the 10th century BCE, there reigned a king whose name still whispers through history. Solomon. He was the son of King David and heir to a kingdom rising in strength and spirit. But it wasn't his victories in battle or the borders he expanded that made Solomon legendary. It was his mind. Solomon is remembered as one of the wisest rulers who ever lived. The stories say he could settle disputes with perfect fairness, see through deception, and speak with the clarity of a sage. One tale tells of two women claiming to be the mother of a child. Solomon, without judgment, suggested the child be divided, knowing the true mother would cry out in protection. She did, and with that, he revealed the truth. No swords were raised, only wisdom. But Solomon wasn't only wise, he was immensely wealthy. His kingdom sat along vital trade routes linking Arabia, Egypt, and Mesopotamia. He controlled the flow of spices, copper, horses, and incense. Gold poured into Jerusalem, so much so that the Bible says silver was considered nearly worthless in his time. The weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year, it says, was 666 talents of gold. That's over 25 tons of gold annually, And that's not counting tributes, trade, or hidden stores. He used this fortune to build something extraordinary, the first temple in Jerusalem, a sacred place of worship and unity, covered in cedar wood, adorned with gold, and filled with light. According to ancient texts, the temple was lined with gold, inside and out. Cherubim made of olive wood stood 10 cubits high. Golden chains and carved palm trees decorated the walls. It was not just a structure, it was a symbol of divine connection and the heart of a kingdom. Solomon's reach extended across the known world. He welcomed visitors, scholars, and foreign leaders. One such visitor, the Queen of Sheba, came to test him with riddles, bringing with her camels laden with spices, gold, and precious stones. When she saw his palace, his court, his knowledge, she was astonished, and quietly she said, "Your wisdom and wealth exceed even the stories I heard." But Solomon's greatest legacy wasn't his treasure, it was his writings. He is believed to have authored or inspired much of the Book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs, texts filled with reflections on life, love, and what truly matters. He wrote, "Better a dry crust with peace than a house full of feasting, with strife. And wisdom is more precious than rubies." Even the richest man of his time knew gold fades, but insight remains. And so tonight, as we drift through the quiet courtyards of ancient Jerusalem, with the glow of oil lamps flickering against golden walls, we listen not for the clinking of coins, but for the quiet voice of a king who understood that the truest riches lie in clarity, peace, and the thoughtful stillness of the heart. Now we drift toward the heart of Europe, to the age of silk, chandeliers, and powdered wigs, to a court so dazzling it seemed almost unreal, a place where fountains whispered beneath moonlight and gold leaf shimmered on every surface. This was France in the 17th century, and ruling at its center was a king who became legend even in his own lifetime, Louis XIV, the Sun King. He ruled for 72 years, the longest reign of any monarch in European history. And under his rule, France became not only powerful, but the very symbol of elegance and grandeur. Louis wasn't just a king. He was the center of a carefully choreographed world. He believed that royalty should shine, that a king's presence should inspire awe, like the rising sun at dawn. And so, he built a palace to match that vision. Versailles. Originally a hunting lodge outside Paris, Louis transformed it into the most opulent royal residence in the world, a living monument to absolute power, beauty, and meticulous design. It had over 2,300 rooms, more than 350 clocks, miles of corridors, and gardens so vast and symmetrical. They looked like they had been trimmed by the stars themselves, one visitor called it. A dream carved into marble in hedgerows. The walls inside were covered in mirrors, reflecting candlelight until it danced in every direction. The ceilings were painted with mythological scenes, casting gods and heroes above the heads of courtiers. And the king? He had his own schedule, followed by hundreds. Each morning, nobles gathered for the lever, ceremonial waking, where select courtiers were honored with the task of helping the king get dressed, not privately, but as a performance, the golden ballet of royalty. Louis had taste, but also discipline. He restructured the entire French nobility, drawing them close to Versailles, so he could keep their ambitions in sight, not through fear, but with velvet ropes and elegant distractions. His wealth was staggering. He wore diamonds, embroidered heels, and carried canes adorned with ivory and gold. He funded grand wars, majestic operas, and architectural marvels. At the height of his reign, nearly a quarter of France's national budget was spent on Versailles. But to Louis, this was not waste. It was power made visible, a kingdom expressed through beauty. And yet, beneath the ceremony and splendor, Louis XIV was a thoughtful man. He loved music. He studied statecraft deeply, and he left behind not just mirrors and marble, but a carefully crafted political legacy that shaped France for generations. Tonight, we walk quietly through the Hall of Mirrors, our footsteps soft on polished floors. Candles flicker, gilded chairs rest empty, and the scent of orange blossoms drifts in from the royal gardens, where fountains still murmur the songs of another time. We remember that even in the grandest courts, there were moments of quiet, reflections, a single king rising with the sun, dreaming of legacy, and perhaps of sleep. Now we drift north, into the vast wintry hush of Imperial Russia, where pine trees stretch toward gray skies, palaces sleep beneath falling snow, and silence lingers softly over everything. Here, in the early years of the 20th century, ruled the last emperor of Russia, Tsar Nicholas II. He was born into wealth beyond imagination. The Romanovs had ruled for over 300 years, and their empire spanned 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. From frozen tundra to golden wheat fields, from the palaces of St. Petersburg to the farthest Siberian outposts, it was a kingdom of impossible size and staggering riches. Tsar Nicholas lived in the Alexander Palace, a residence of soft tapestries, crystal chandeliers, and polished parquet floors. He wore uniforms trimmed in gold, signed letters with the Romanov seal, and oversaw a treasury filled with diamonds, emeralds, and Fabergé eggs, miniature masterpieces of enamel, gold, and surprise. One such egg, gifted by the Tsar to his wife Alexandra, opened to reveal a miniature golden carriage. Another hid a wind-up swan that glided silently across a tiny mirrored pond. But even with this abundance, Nicholas was not known for extravagance. He was quiet, gentle, deeply devoted to his family, his wife, 4 daughters, and son. They spent quiet evenings reading by lamplight, ice skating on frozen rivers, writing letters in careful handwriting. In the Tsar's private journal, you won't find declarations of war or fiery speeches. You'll find had tea with Alex, walked with the girls, played with Alexei. But the world outside was changing fast. Russia was modernizing. The people were restless. Revolutionary ideas spread like sparks in dry grass. And while Nicholas was devoted to tradition, the tide of history surged forward and swept everything away. In 1917, during the chaos of World War I and internal unrest, Nicholas II abdicated the throne. The empire that had stood for centuries, that had built palaces, parades, and cathedrals topped with gold, was suddenly quiet. The Romanovs were placed under house arrest. At first, they lived with dignity, still setting the table with folded napkins, still reading aloud from classic novels. But the days grew colder. They were moved to Yekaterinburg, a gray house surrounded by high fences and guards. And on a quiet night in July 1918, the dynasty ended. It was a tragic, silent moment, one that still echoes in history. But tonight, we do not dwell in sorrow. We linger instead in the beauty of what was, the stillness of snow falling over palaces, the soft laughter of daughters learning French, the scent of birch trees through an open window. Nicholas II did not build empires. He inherited one. And in its final days, he became not just a ruler, but a father, a husband, a quiet figure walking slowly through the fading light of a golden age. Tonight, we remember the hush of that world, its gentleness, its grandeur, and its final breath whispered into the white Russian sky. Tonight, we remain in Russia, but the light changes. Where before there was snowfall and silence, now there is candlelight flickering across parchment, a court humming with conversation, and the gentle rustle of silk moving through mirrored halls. This is the world of Catherine the Great, empress, reformer, philosopher, and legend. She was not born in Russia. She came from a small German principality, a princess with ambition, wit, and a mind like polished steel. At the age of 14, she was invited to marry the future Emperor of Russia. She learned the language, studied the culture, and transformed herself with discipline and grace. When her husband, Peter III, proved unfit to rule, Catherine did the unthinkable. She led a bloodless coup and took the throne herself. In 1762, she became Empress of Russia and would rule for 34 years. Under Catherine, Russia flourished. She expanded the empire by over 200,000 square miles, strengthened the economy, modernized the legal system, and corresponded with the greatest minds of the Enlightenment. She exchanged letters with Voltaire, Diderot, and Montesquieu. She built libraries. She opened schools for girls. She translated French philosophy into Russian, and all the while she hosted dazzling gatherings at court, evenings filled with music, poetry, astronomy, and debate. Her winter palace gleamed with gold and jade, but Catherine's true treasure was her mind. She believed in reason, reform, and the dignity of education. She once wrote, "I am a monarch, but I am also a woman, and a woman who thinks." She created the Hermitage Museum, now one of the greatest art collections in the world, by collecting over 4,000 paintings during her reign, from Rembrandt and Rubens to Greek statues and Chinese porcelain. Her court was as cultured as any in Europe, and beneath its luxury pulsed a quiet, determined will to lift Russia forward. But Catherine was not without scandal. She took lovers, many of them. But unlike the gossip of other courts, she made no apologies. She chose freely, ruled boldly, and refused to shrink for anyone. Her letters were as sharp as her policies, and her vision stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea, not with cruelty, but with clarity. And yet, she adored the quiet too. She often retreated to her private study, lit only by a single lamp, to read, reflect, or write long handwritten letters late into the night. There was power in her crown, but also in her pen. Tonight we walk slowly through the echoing marble halls of the Hermitage. The chandeliers are dim, paintings sleep in golden frames, and through tall windows the snow falls gently over the Neva River. We remember Catherine not just as a conqueror, but as a woman who dared to think, to build, and to dream with open eyes. She was not born royal. She became it, and in doing so, she left behind not only an empire, but a soft, enduring truth, that wisdom, art, and courage are riches the world never forgets. And now, our journey brings us to a woman the world knew well, yet never fully. A queen not of legend or marble statues, but of recent memory, a presence both constant and serene, who ruled not with noise, but with stillness. This is the story of Queen Elizabeth II, a queen of grace, endurance, and quiet strength. She was born in 1926, the daughter of the Duke and Duchess of York. She was not expected to be queen, but history, as it often does, changed course. When her uncle abdicated the throne, her father became King George VI, and young Elizabeth, barely 10 years old, became heir to the British throne. She was crowned in 1953 at just 25 years old, and for the next 70 years, she would serve as the longest reigning monarch in British history. Her reign spanned 15 prime ministers, from Winston Churchill to Liz Truss. She met 14 U.S. presidents, 7 popes, and presided through wars, global crises, and breathtaking social change. And yet, through it all, she remained steady. Queen Elizabeth wasn't known for extravagance. She preferred simple meals, countryside walks, and the company of her beloved corgis. Her wealth, while immense, was never part of her presence. Her true currency was duty, consistency, a gentle devotion to service. She held no real political power, but she carried something deeper, the weight of tradition, the silence of personal sacrifice, and the invisible rhythm of state. She read daily dispatch boxes full of government briefings. She hosted hundreds of heads of state. And yet, her public words were often brief, carefully chosen, like pearls placed gently in velvet. She lived in Buckingham Palace, a home of chandeliers, ballrooms, and centuries of history. But her favorite residence was Balmoral Castle in Scotland, where the hills roll gently and the air smells of heather and earth. There, she would walk in tweed and boots, ride her horses, and read by the fire. Even queens need quiet. Her crown contained some of the most precious jewels in the world: the Cullinan diamond, the Black Prince's ruby, and the Koh-i-Noor sao. Each stone held centuries of history, glimmering like frozen time. And yet, she wore them with dignity, never vanity, as if to say, "This does not belong to me. I carry it for now." Queen Elizabeth gave taus, Christmas speeches to millions, visited more than 120 countries, and rarely spoke of herself. She let the crown speak through silence, symbolism, and unwavering presence. Tonight, we do not remember her for ceremonies, but for the calm behind the pageantry. A young girl in a car during the Blitz, a mother in mourning, a leader in pearls and patience, a woman who stood quietly as the world spun quickly. And now, as we imagine her favorite gardens at dusk, the hedgerows trimmed, the corgis sleeping nearby, and the sky soft with Scottish rain, we close our eyes, not in sadness, but in admiration for a life not measured by riches, but by responsibility, held gently for longer than most of us can remember. Now we journey east to a land of sunlit courtyards and flowering jasmine, where delicate calligraphy lined palace walls and the scent of sandalwood drifted through the air. This is India in the 1500s, the time of the Mughal Empire. And tonight we meet Akbar the Great, a ruler remembered not just for how far his empire stretched, but for how wide his heart opened. Akbar was born in 1542 and crowned emperor at just 13 years old. He could not read or write, but his mind was brilliant. He listened deeply, he asked questions constantly, and what he built with care. Under his reign, the Mughal Empire became one of the richest, most powerful states in the world. Its economy flourished with trade in cotton, spices, and precious gems. Its cities grew vibrant with architecture, art, and open debate. He ruled over a diverse empire: Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Jains, and instead of dividing his people, he sought to bring them together. Akbar abolished the jizya tax on non-Muslims, married women from different religious backgrounds, and held regular meetings in his palace, where scholars of all faiths could speak openly and respectfully. He even created a philosophy of his own, Din-i-Ilahi, a blend of ethical teachings that focus not on dogma but on peace. And yet, Akbar was not soft. He was a skilled strategist, a fearless warrior when needed, and a firm ruler. But his legacy shines not in conquest, but in balance, in knowing when to build, when to listen, and when to simply let people be. He built Fatehpur Sikri, a city of red sandstone designed with Persian arches, Indian domes, and wide courtyards open to the sky. Its Diwan-i-Khas, or Hall of Private Audience, had a carved central pillar that supported a platform where Akbar would sit, surrounded by advisors listening to voices from every corner of his kingdom. And when he traveled, his caravan was said to be so long it looked like a flowing river of silk and color, winding its way through the land. Despite his power, Akbar dressed simply, ate modestly, and often rose before dawn to pray, reflect, or walk among his people. He founded libraries, patronized poets, and invited artists to illustrate the great epics of India and Persia. With miniature paintings so intricate, they could fit whole worlds onto a single page. Tonight, we imagine him under a starlit sky, seated in a quiet garden, surrounded by lanterns, his eyes steady and kind. He was called great, not because of what he conquered, but because of what he created. An empire of ideas, an atmosphere of inclusion, and a dream of unity that echoed far beyond his lifetime. And so we rest beneath the carved arches of a Mughal palace, the air warm, the walls humming with centuries of art and thought, and remember a time when a king's greatest strength was his ability to listen. Now we return once more to ancient China, to a time of carved jade, whispering bamboo, and scrolls written by candlelight. But this time we do not find a king. We find an empress, Wu Zetian, the only woman in all of Chinese history to rule as emperor in her own name. She was born in 624 CE during the Tang dynasty, a golden age of poetry, astronomy, and innovation. She entered the palace as a concubine, a quiet figure in a world ruled by men. But Wu was observant. She listened. She studied politics. She mastered language, calligraphy, and diplomacy. She saw the world clearly, and she began to rise. When the emperor died, Wu did something bold. She did not retreat. She took power, first as regent, then as sovereign. In 690 CE, Wu Zetian declared herself Emperor of China, not Empress Consort, not Dowager, Emperor, a title that had only ever belonged to men. Her rule was firm but wise. She elevated scholars through imperial examinations, founded new schools, and expanded China's borders. Under her guidance, the country flourished in trade and agriculture. She supported Buddhism, commissioned temples, and offered land reforms that helped common people. She surrounded herself with skilled ministers, regardless of their background, and made decisions based not on lineage, but on merit, an idea centuries ahead of its time. Yet her legacy was complex. Many records of her reign were altered or destroyed after her death by men uncomfortable with the idea of a woman holding absolute power. She was painted as ruthless, ambitious, dangerous. But history, like moonlight on water, is always shifting. And when we look more closely, we see brilliance, not cruelty, strength, not scandal. A woman who broke barriers not for glory, but because she knew she could rule well. Wu Zetian left behind not just buildings and borders, but a quiet revolution. She proved that leadership could be graceful, strategic, and deeply human, regardless of gender. She reminded the world that wisdom is not limited by tradition, that true power comes from vision. And so tonight, we imagine her seated behind a silk-draped screen, her eyes calm, her voice low, a quiet empress in a court of whispers, shaping the future with the stroke of a brush. Outside, the lanterns glow, the scholars copy texts, and the night flows gently across the mountains of ancient China. And now, dear dreamer, we let the golden doors close. The palaces grow quiet. The footsteps of kings and queens fade into the gentle hush of time. We have walked with Mansa Musa through the glowing sands of Mali, felt the thoughtful stillness of Emperor Shenzong as he studied scrolls by lantern light, and stood beneath the golden arches of Solomon's temple, where wisdom shimmered more brightly than wealth. We wandered through Versailles, where Louis XIV ruled like the rising sun, and drifted through the last snowy silence of Tsar Nicholas II's world, where crowns no longer mattered and only love remained, we met Catherine the Great, who turned thought into action and ink into power. We saw Elizabeth II carry history with quiet grace, her legacy shaped not by jewels, but by steadiness. We followed the footsteps of Akbar, who built empires with tolerance and dreams, and we sat in stillness with Wu Zetian, the empress who reminded us all that strength doesn't shout. And as we look back now, softly we see something beautiful. Not one of these rulers could take their gold with them. Not one could keep their titles forever. But what they left behind was something far more precious. Wisdom, ideas, kindness, balance, a moment of peace in a restless world. You too carry a kind of crown, one made not of gold, but of presence, of how gently you speak, how kindly you rest, how thoughtfully you dream. And so, now as the candle burns low and the palace gates close quietly behind us, you are invited to sleep with the peace of emperors, the grace of queens, and the calm that only comes when you know you don't have to rule anything at all. You may simply rest. Sleep well and let history hold your dreams tonight.